Hello everyone, it's George from Ireland, so welcome back to my channel. I've got a bit of a tan. This video is commenting about Trump's erratic and imbecilic foreign policy. Policy is probably too strong a word. I remember I made a video several years ago saying that Trump is a modern Nero. I noticed a French politician has picked up the expression as well. He is his own court jester, except of course he's got no sense of humor. He's surrounded by these fawning and sycophantic consiglieri who no doubt reinforce his delusions. I knew someone who was advising NATO troops, particularly American commanders in Afghanistan. This is 20 years ago. And they come up with a plan, and then they'd say, red can me, which meant, tell me my plan isn't going to work, critique me. And as someone who's mature, a person should welcome reproof and consider all possibilities, try and provide against things going wrong. But Putin's got his Camarilla, who is not helping him at all in this case, and groupthink often occurs, but amongst his cabal, it's probably worse than anywhere else. And there's lots of ways that he's mismanaged his maladministration, which are going to be contributory factors to his disastrous foreign policy. The ideologically driven dismissal of civil servants. So he is against the very idea of impartiality, disinterested advice, and indeed the notion of public service is Hebrew to him. The idea that people would work for the United States, for the betterment of their own country, that they wouldn't be driven by any partisan agenda. They would just try and do the best for whichever president was elected, would tell the president the plain truth, whether he or she likes it, dislikes it, don't care. That sensible decisions can only be made on the basis of the truth, however unattractive that might be. Well, the man, the art of the deal. He did not write that book, and I bet my bottom dollar he hasn't read it either. He's terrible at doing deals, which is why he's gone bankrupt 4 times. But he says it's actually like Obama, though he wouldn't like to be reminded of this, the Pacific pivot, that what's happening in the Far East matters more to the United States than what's happening in Europe. But he doesn't want China to take back Taiwan, though China's got a very strong claim to it. But he cannot deter China by abasing himself before Russia. What kind of a deterrent is that? And he's all about toughness. Well, it's tough to support Ukraine when the American public is somewhat disenchanted with that. Over 3 years of war, after the Ukrainians have suffered over 100,000 combat deaths, the Russians more than double that amount, after the United States has gifted something like $100 billion worth of equipment and training and so forth, that the costs are mounting. But you just think what the cost would be of an actual war, the cost of preparing for one, of deterrence is a fraction of the cost of a real war. But China is emboldened by this vacillation in the White House. Previously, Republicans like presidents like George W. Bush who did not waver. You might say that if you realize you're doing the wrong thing, you change your mind. Is that John Stuart Mill? What do you do, sir? But anyway, the United States has never disgraced itself before by surrendering to a foe that is much weaker. And the United States is not even fighting. So Trump on the Russo-Ukrainian war applauds the aggressor. And essentially, what would you expect with a convicted criminal in the White House? A man who was convicted of over 24 crimes, a man who's been proven to have sexually abused a woman. Well, I wouldn't expect anything better. So anyway, there he is, executive orders like it's confetti. Remember his grand old party, their furious denunciations of Obama when he signed executive orders, fulminating against Joe Biden when he suffered a smaller number of executive orders. So Trump's totally against checks and balances and talking about wanting to control the media, that they're enemies of the people, the sort of Putinite language for whom journalists and terrorists are the same thing. So no doubt he shares many values with Putin, his bromance with Putin. It really is nauseating. And that's why they had those talks with the Russian delegation in Riyadh over the heads of the Ukrainians. And obviously that's what Russia likes, on the basis they claim that Ukraine is not even a nation, it's just a proxy for the United States. And even some Trumpist officials have actually given credence to that lie. Delegitimizing Ukraine is very worrying and utterly sickening. And then Trump sent an official to have talks with Russia, but the Russians snubbed him. Putin's all about face. They felt insulted that it wasn't someone of significant rank, treating like they're unimportant. So that was a serious miscue by Trump. Was it a calculated insult? I don't think so. I think it was sheer stupidity. But Putin is now Trump is now a publicist for Putin, and he wants the United States media to be really Trump PR, and he just is very very intolerant of anyone who tell him the plain truth. And he would like the United States to be a wholly owned subsidiary of of Putin Inc. And I know so Russia's a mafia state, and Trump presumably wants the same. So he behaves like a mafia don. He's all into extortion and fraud and so on. So it comes as no surprise to anyone who studied him. Remember some of Trump's moves, as people said, came on the anniversary of the Reichstag fire, the funeral of German democracy. But Trump is his own Marinus van der Lubbe. He is deranged, and he certainly sucks up to a communist tyrant. The United States Constitution is robust, and but this is a real stress test. Can it survive a second Trump administration? I know there's been too much hyperbolic language about this, but I don't think the USA is going to be a dictatorship at the end of these 4 years. But he's wrought more damage to the United States in his 6 weeks in office, possibly than his previous 4 years. But Trump is a traitor. He is a cheerleader for wars of illegal aggression. And again, this is no surprise. You should see the Steele dossier by Christopher Steele, that former British MI6 officer, way back in 2016. He didn't know who was paying for this, so he told the truth. He didn't try and just tell them what they wanted to hear. Putin, who publicly fantasizes about invading Greenland, Panama, Gaza, my goodness. So there he is making Putin look, well, not as bad by comparison. And when President Macron of France visited the USA, he met Trump, and then at that time, Trump was having his United States ambassador to the United Nations vote against a resolution condemning Russia's war in Ukraine, which was obviously a big encouragement of the Russians to continue. And 2 days after that, the embattled hero Volodymyr Zelensky was in the Oval Office. There, he's meeting Trump, the draft dodger. Oh yeah, by the way, Donald, let's see those bone spurs. That was the excuse for how he got out of the draft. Bone spurs are lifelong. If he had them in the 60s, he still has them. But of course, he'll never submit himself to a real medical examination. So Trump railed against Zelensky, who'd saved his country. Just a temper tantrum. Trump blocking a delivery of weapons already promised. Ukrainian civilians being killed as a direct result of this. So the USA will so often betray its friends in South Vietnam, in Lebanon, elsewhere, in Afghanistan. Now, you might say the United States should never have fought in Vietnam. Perhaps you're right. But nevertheless, it was abandoning people who had trusted them. So we will have to now face the facts that the United States is unreliable. And if Russia wins, it will send shockwaves all through Europe and indeed the world. And obviously, not enough was done in the run up to 2022. Shall we give fewer arms as provocative? No, it's not. Small arms shipments since 2014, Russia kept attacking, seizing more and more land. It's not provocative to help a country defend itself. It is provocative to invade another country. It is provocative to use gray zone warfare. It's provocative of Russia to try and poison their president, Lukashenko, and so on. It's provocative, all their cyber attacks, all their disinformation. So Ukraine will not be the last victim of Russia if they succeed. The Russians already legally occupying some of Moldova and Georgia for over 30 years. Places like Latvia, Kazakhstan on their hit list. Alaska, some Russian politicians have openly talked about invading the United States, taking back Alaska. So Putin wants to return to a Cold War in as much as Russia, in its then guise, the Soviet Union, was halfway across Europe, had troops even in Berlin. So the global south may back Russia if Russia transpires to be the victor, but I don't think so. The good news is that Russia is somewhat exhausted, and they sort of need this ceasefire. Putin is caught on the horns of a quandary. Does he agree to the ceasefire or not? If he angers Trump, will Trump increase military aid? Thankfully, he restored intelligence sharing with the Ukrainians. There's a Soviet legacy which some appreciate in the global south. Wait a second, the Russian Federation is not the Soviet Union. Ukraine was 25% of the Soviet Union. So anything good the Soviet Union achieved, Ukraine achieved. Anyway, Putin wants to destroy the world order and the security architecture, and this is a man whose watchword is stability. Now, since 1928, when the Pact of Paris was signed, the Kellogg-Briand Pact, it was agreed there'd be no wars of annexation, no wars of aggression. You can fight in defense, but you mustn't launch a war. And that was a legal principle used at Nuremberg. Indeed, it was a Soviet jurist, Yon Trenin, who helped to draw this up. The Declaration of London about the prosecution of Nuremberg went on. So that's a core principle of the United Nations Charter. And of course, Russia is very keen to remain a permanent member of the Security Council. But it's true that the United States, as well as Russia, break international law on a large scale and they get away with it. Now, Trump concurs with Putin that laws are for the little people and little nations. So therefore, that they are to oppress the weak and they're to protect the powerful. So Trump wants spheres of influence. He doesn't want international law. Europe needs arms, but it also needs psychological rearmament, needs to believe in itself, stop talking itself down, stop obsessing over past crimes. We can't change the past. We can make sure that these crimes are not committed in future. We have to see which is the cruelest tyranny around, and Russia is pretty close to the top of the list. So Trump and his oligarchs, just like Putin and his oligarchs, special treatment for Trump's oligarchs, Mar-a-Lago treaties. That's the way he likes to operate. So totalitarians the world over like Putin, and totalitarianisms, they vary, but they have some factors in common. And of course, that's what Putin likes to spread. He's over against democracy, and obviously Trump is envious of Putin. Trump would like to have totalitarianism in the United States. I don't think it's going to get it. So most totalitarians, they oppose saving Ukraine. They victim blame, just like Trump would victim blame as well. So Putinists, do they want peace? Not really. They might want a breather so they can start more wars. They want oppression. They want peace, but slavery is not peace. NATO is in peril. But Trump's gone too far in trashing NATO and suggesting he wouldn't save NATO allies, which has been a core pillar of US foreign and military policy for almost 80 years. And some people in the Republican Party have spoken out against Trump, bad-mouthing the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. But the United States has proved itself to be untrustworthy. The United States should remember one day the USA may need her allies. And even Fox News has castigated some Trumpist statements as going too far. But at the moment, you have to acknowledge that Trump is mighty. He's got both houses of Congress on his side. He's got plenty of judges on his side, and he's got a largely pliant media. And obviously, there are some elements of the media which are rightly speaking out. So Ukraine can win, but it needs a lot more armaments than getting up to now. Obviously, very difficult to do so if the United States is not going to supply them. They've achieved many extraordinary feats. They've consistently outperformed expectations. The Russians have always underperformed. The Ukrainians, every single day, they carry out these deeds of daring, prove themselves to be heroes undaunted. They faced very long odds, and they defeated a far superior enemy. They've often held their ground. They've astonished the world again and again with their fortitude, indefatigability, innovation, and resilience. They prove the naysayers and the defeatists wrong. But that doesn't mean that they can hold out forever, especially if they're starved of the weapons that were promised them. So don't believe in the Putin lie machine. The Russian economy is being trashed. It's got this 25% interest rate. There are over 1 million workers short, and that's growing. Their inflation is high. You know, the Russian ruble has lost value. The gold reserves and national wealth fund will run out by January next year. So they've lost a lot of markets. They may never get those back. The airline's about to go bust. It's just staggering. There's been no major air disaster. So anyway, Europe is waking up and rearming. It's taken 3 years. So European NATO countries are better armed than they have been for about 35 years. And Russia, in some ways, is worse armed than it was since the mid-90s, because they've had about 10,000 tanks destroyed. The 5,000 tanks they got left are often decades old in poor condition. So this has been a huge own goal by Russia. Europe is better armed. That's been for a long time. And obviously, the money the European NATO countries are spending now, that's not going to result in tanks and planes and troops immediately. Even to recruit and train soldiers is going to take at least a few months. Some of these weapon systems are going to take a few years. But European countries need to take a risk and speed up aid to the Ukraine, recognizing that as the front line of Europe, that if Russia doesn't get through Ukraine, it'll never attack anywhere else. If they do conquer Ukraine, they're coming for other countries. So that's why we need to confiscate Russian states' assets. There are legal precedents for this. It would make them pay for the pain. It would take the pressure off the European taxpayers and so on. It'd also be a deter other aggressors. They realize what happens to them. Fortunately, the incoming German Chancellor Friedrich Merz says that Europe needs a new military alliance. Now, I'm the sort of person who was opposed to a European army, but I'm having second thoughts now that the United States is not reliable. Republic of Ireland, I think we should join NATO. United Kingdom, I'm glad we're in it as well. And I'm glad that France kept its independent nuclear capability, Charles de Gaulle proved prescient. I remember the Mururoa Atoll tests 30 years ago under President Jacques Chirac, and he was widely castigated for it. This was risky. He said it's completely safe. If it really is safe, why is France testing its nuclear weapons in the Pacific Ocean and not in Paris? And Chirac said the enemies of today might not be might be the friends of the future. Our allies at the moment might be our enemies in future. So we have to be ready. So perhaps he was prescient. He had someone I didn't say much for, but I have to acknowledge his perspicacity. So the United Kingdom needs to develop an independent nuclear capability, pay France some of the technology. The French spend 6 billion euros a year maintaining their nuclear capability. And other countries like Germany or Poland said, can we pay you some of the cost of it? And then you extend your nuclear umbrella over us, station your nuclear weapons in our country. But anyway, interoperability is needed from NATO. So as in the munitions for this weapon can serve that weapon, that they all use the same systems. More munitions are needed, and NATO countries are stepping up production of 155 millimeter shells. They're getting them produced in Pakistan and India and elsewhere. The refueling in the air capability they need to get, and various anti-missile shields, satellites, step up intelligence sharing. So Ursula von der Leyen says that European Union countries are going to do this. There'll be some foot dragging. I'm rather a Eurosceptic, but as it does exist, Republic of Ireland, as we are in it, I suppose we might be better off making it work better. And if French nuclear weapons was positioned in Lithuania, the closest country to Moscow, they would be in Moscow within 30 seconds. The Russians wouldn't have a chance to shoot it down or to Putin to run to his bunker. So other European Union countries should pay France to come under their nuclear umbrella. So Russia is not to be trusted. We've got the Budapest Memorandum, which they've broken, the Minsk I agreement, the Minsk II agreement, and this would just be like a Minsk III agreement. Endless lies on Ukraine. The only reason we can be sure that Russia is not going to invade Ukraine again is if Ukraine is armed to the teeth, has got foreign allies they're willing to fight. So Russia can have peace today. Leave Ukraine immediately. Get in your vehicles, drive out. You'll be out in a couple of hours. Even those who are furthest into Ukraine will just be out within a few hours. You might have to leave your military equipment behind. Return the hostages, over 20,000 children, release all the prisoners of war, pay compensation, and apologize. Maybe even a demilitarized zone in Russia. Promise not to pay to invade again. Saving Ukraine will not be cheap or easy, but freedom is not free. Freedom comes at a very high cost. This is something that Trump would really not know. Anyway, so Trump couldn't have come at a worse time, really. And I thought it was going to be bad on Ukraine. He's probably been about as bad as I thought. So much for peace within 24 hours. I think that Putin will say yes, and then break his word as he always does. Say yes, dial down the fighting, and then some big attack and say, oh, the Ukrainians did it. I mean, if then one Ukrainian fired one shot, then Putin would hugely overreact, looking for an excuse. Or even if there was no excuse, just lie. Fire things that Ukraine said, oh no, the Ukrainians fired it themselves. He'll always victim blame. It'll always be false flag, maskirovka. But if he doesn't, he might be worried what Trump will do. But Trump is so erratic, he could cut the Ukrainians off again. There's no telling what he's going to do because of his derangement of mind, because of his senile dementia. Anyway, thank you for watching my channel. Make sure to subscribe on Patreon, donate to PayPal, georgecallahan79@gmail.com. Toodaloo.